It was a calm and quiet morning at the Sunnybrook Veterans Home in Ohio. The sun peeked through the windows, casting soft golden light over the hallways. Elderly veterans sipped their coffee, shared stories from long ago, and watched birds flutter outside. Nurses moved gently between rooms, checking vitals and offering kind smiles. But then, something unexpected happened. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the front entrance. Moments later, Donald Trump and Melania Trump stepped out. There were no reporters, no flashing cameras, no press entourage. This visit was not about politics or publicity, it was personal. The news traveled fast through the halls. Whispers turned into wide eyes. Some residents wheeled themselves closer to the lobby, others peeked from behind half-open doors. A few were skeptical, many were surprised, but most were simply curious. Trump and Melania moved slowly through the facility, greeting each veteran warmly. Trump listened attentively as a Navy vet spoke of his time in the Pacific. Melania leaned in close to thank an elderly woman who once worked in a WWII hospital. They weren't rushing. They made time for every handshake, every story. Then a nurse gently tapped Melania's shoulder and whispered, "There's one woman you must meet." Down the hall. That's where the real story begins. In room 214, the air was still, filled with the soft beeping of a heart monitor and the gentle scent of lavender. Sitting upright in a recliner, wrapped in a knitted blanket, was Margaret Wallace, 94 years old. A former Army nurse during World War II, Margaret had seen more in her youth than most would in a lifetime. Her body had grown frail, her voice faint, but her mind was sharp, her memories vivid. The door opened quietly, and Donald Trump stepped in beside Melania. "Good morning, ma'am," Trump said respectfully, leaning slightly toward her. "Thank you for your service." Margaret turned her head slowly, eyes adjusting. She blinked. Then recognition dawned. But instead of smiling or reacting with fanfare, she lifted one trembling finger and pointed to the small faded photo frame on her nightstand. Inside was a black and white photograph of a young Margaret, standing next to a soldier in uniform with a wide smile. "My husband, Charlie," she whispered. "He never made it back from the war." Melania moved closer, gently taking Margaret's hand. Her eyes filled with tears. "I never got to say goodbye," Margaret said, voice cracking, "but I always hoped someone would hear his story." Trump paused, visibly moved, then pulled up a chair. "Tell us," he said softly, and Margaret began to speak. Margaret's voice trembled, but she never stopped speaking. Her hands, wrinkled by time, held tightly onto a delicate yellowed envelope, worn at the edges but still carefully preserved. "We met during training," she began, her gaze far away, as if seeing it all again. "Charlie was a medic, brave, kind, a real gentleman. They married quietly in a small chapel just a week before he was sent overseas. No fancy dress, no guests, just us, and a promise to wait for each other." Her eyes glistened as she held up a folded sheet of paper from the envelope. "He wrote to me every week, every single week. I memorized his words." She unfolded the letter slowly. His last one said he couldn't wait to come home. Build a house with a white fence. Raise a family. We even had names picked out for our kids. But then her voice broke. "The next thing I received was a telegram. Just a few words. Killed in action." That was it. Melania gasped, covering her mouth, eyes red with tears. Trump, known for his tough persona, sat silently, visibly moved. He placed a gentle hand on Margaret's shoulder. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Promise me, tell people about Charlie. Don't let his story fade," Trump nodded. "I promise, Margaret." Then she did something unexpected. She handed him Charlie's final letter. "Take it," she said. "Read it to the world someday." The room was utterly still. No staff, no press, just two prominent figures and a 94-year-old woman holding on to a memory the world had nearly forgotten. Donald Trump took the letter, hands unusually gentle, as if he were holding something sacred. His usual commanding presence softened. He didn't speak, he just nodded. Deeply, respectfully. Melania leaned in and kissed Margaret's hand, her voice a soft whisper. "Thank you. Not just for your service, but for your heart." Margaret smiled weakly, a tear rolling down her cheek. "He would have liked you to," she said, her eyes closing briefly as if imagining Charlie standing beside her once more. As the Trumps quietly stepped out of the room, Trump turned back one final time. "You've reminded me what real courage looks like," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Later that afternoon, outside the Veterans Home, a small crowd of reporters had gathered. Microphones were raised, cameras flashed. One shouted, "Mr. Trump, how was your visit today?" There was a long pause. Trump didn't mention politics. He didn't talk about policies or polls. He simply said, "Sometimes, a letter from 1945 can teach us more than any headline ever could." And with that, they stepped into their vehicle, leaving behind a room, a woman, and a moment the world would never forget. The story might have ended there. Quiet, heartfelt, and tucked away behind the doors of room 214. But fate had something bigger in mind. One of the nurses who witnessed the moment later shared it on social media. Her post read, "Today I saw Donald Trump and Melania cry. They met a 94-year-old veteran widow. She handed him her husband's last letter from WWII. She just wanted him to be remembered." The post spread like wildfire. Within hours, it had gone viral. Millions shared it. Comments poured in. Will he read the letter? Who was Charlie? Where can we hear his story? Just days later, Donald Trump released a short video. He sat in a quiet room, holding the worn letter with care. As he read aloud, his voice cracked, especially at the last few lines. "Margaret, I can't wait to come home and see you in that blue dress. I dream of you every night. If something happens to me, promise me you'll live. Promise you'll remember me." The video reached millions in hours. Margaret passed away peacefully just 2 weeks later. But her last wish had already come true. Charlie's story was finally heard. And through one tender moment in room 214, an entire nation paused and remembered what love, sacrifice, and honor truly mean.